Hi everyone. Okay, so the teachers at Lark Rise, we have been asked to share a section of a book, chapter of a book with you guys. And I have chosen to share a chapter from a book from the series Wings of Fire. Now this book series is being enjoyed by a group of girls in my class. And I know some of them have read, I think, 9 or 10 from the series so far. So fantastic reading, well done girls. I borrowed this copy from the gorgeous Ada Burgle from Magpie class. She dropped it around to Lark Rise the other day. And I thought I would share a chapter with you all to see whether you'll also be inspired to join in and read some of the series. I'm going to read the blurb for you on the back just to give you a little overview of what the series is about. The Dragonettes are coming to save the day. Clay has lived his whole life under the mountain. The mud-winged dragonette knows that war is raging between the dragon tribes in the outside world, a war that he and 4 other dragonettes are destined to end, according to the mysterious prophecy they've been taught. The 5 chosen dragonettes were stolen from their homes when they were still in their eggs and hidden away for years, all to fulfill the prophecy. But not every dragonette wants a destiny, and when danger threatens one of their own, Clay and his friends may choose freedom over fate, leave the mountain and set the dragon world on a course that no one could have predicted. So I've chosen a chapter, and in this chapter we're going to meet 2 of the dragonettes. We're going to meet Clay and we're going to meet Tsunami. So let's get going. Clay had flown before, short hops around the caves, dodging the stalactites and flapping in circles. But that was nothing compared to this. Everything was so big. The sky was everywhere. It just went on and on and on, like nothing could ever fill it up. It was night, but the light of the 3 moons were dazzling over a lifetime of caves and sputtering torches. Craggy mountain peaks bit into the sky all around him. In the distance, he thought he still saw a glimmer of sea. And the stars. Clay had thought he knew stars from gazing out of the sky hole. He'd never known how many there were, or how they looked like a silver net cast across the dark. He felt like he could keep flying up and up forever, all the way to the moons. He wondered if any dragon had ever tried to do that. This is what we've been missing all this time. Even the sharp lines of pain between his scales couldn't take away from his excitement. "Can you believe this?" he called, spinning in the air. "Tsunami, isn't it amazing?" There was no answer. Clay lashed his tail to stop spinning and hovered, his eyes darting around the sky. He couldn't see Tsunami anywhere. She wouldn't have flown off without him, would she? Maybe she'd seen the faraway sea. Maybe she saw her home and couldn't resist. Clay knew she wouldn't abandon her friends, but he also knew how desperately she wanted to return to the ocean. He glanced down toward the horizon and spotted her, far below him, flapping in a frantic downward spiral. Something was wrong. It looked like only one of her wings were working. Clay twisted into a dive and barreled towards her. He tucked his wings close to his body, fighting back the terror as he plummeted. Wind whistled past his face. Wind. He'd imagined it all wrong. It was like a live thing, grabbing his tail and throwing him off balance, whisking in his eyes to blind him, flaring under his wings to slow him down. It seemed to dig icicle-sharp claws into his skin, slicing down his scales. The waterfall and the cliff shot past at lightning speed. Was he falling too fast? The ground hurtled towards him. Shadows and moonlight mixed into the shapes he'd never seen and couldn't understand. He had no idea how far away it was or how soon he would reach it. He'd never dealt with distances like this before. Would he be able to stop? Would it hurt when he did? But he could see Tsunami below him, still struggling, so he knew that she wouldn't hit the... She knew that he hadn't hit the bottom yet, and that made him braver. He fell and fell and fell, and she got closer and closer until Clay passed her and instantly flared his wings open. His body slammed upright like he'd run into the wall, and then a moment later, he is whammed again, this time by a heavy sea wing landing on him from above. He tumbled, nearly losing Tsunami over his head, but he caught on to each other with their talons and held tight. With his claws wrapped fiercely around his neck, Clay battled to stay aloft, beating his wings to wide arcs. He wasn't strong enough to lift her, but at least he could slow her fall. Tsunami let out a yelp, and then Clay felt something like claws snag his wings and tail. They lost their hold on each other as they fell through the trees, smashing branches and ripping off leaves before they thudded to earth. It took Clay a moment before he could breathe again. Tsunami's tail was flopped across his snout. He pushed it aside and sat up, creaking with pain. Tsunami rolled over onto her back, letting her wings flop out to either side. Close up, Clay could see that he was right. One of her azure blue wings was crooked, as if it had been wrenched out of her shoulder. He touched it with one claw, and they both winched. "What happened?" Clay asked. "Getting out of the chain," Tsunami said. "I think I dislocated it." "And you came away with me anyway," Clay said, appalled. "Why didn't you tell me you were hurt?" She shrugged and winced again. "It didn't hurt so much in the river, but once I tried to fly—" "Dirt!" Clay yelled suddenly. "I'm standing on dirt!" He stabbed his claws into the ground and they sunk right into the earth. A thrill ran through him, snout to tail. Tsunami sat up and looked at him. "Yay," she said. "It's amazing," he cried. "Feel how soft it is." He seized a handful of dirt and flung it at her. "Hey, quit that," she protested, defending herself with her good wing. Clay flattened himself to the grass, feeling the warm earth crumble around his legs and clump against his scales. Scents of green and brown and buried sunshine overwhelmed him. It was nothing like the hard, cold, bare rock under the mountain. The ground here was welcoming and full of life. A worm burrowed past his nose and he snapped it up. "Well, now we're even," Tsunami said. "I saved you, you saved—" "I hear the river," Clay cried, jumping up and shaking himself. Tsunami ducked the shower of dirt that flew over him. "River plus dirt means mud." He spun around and raced through the trees toward the sound of the bubbling water. Tsunami found him rolling blissfully in the muddy banks of the river. "I don't think most dragons get this excited about being so dirty," she said wryly. "I bet my kind do," Clay said, ignoring her sarcasm. "I've never been this warm in my whole life." For the first time ever, his claws didn't ache, his scales didn't itch, his wings didn't feel so dry, and he wasn't worried about stubbing his talons every other step. He felt the mud squelch into the gaps between his scales and realised that the pain from the cave poison was fading, as if the mud was healing him. He sighed happily, squishing himself further down into the damp river bank. "Wow," Tsunami said. She stuck her front talons in the river. "And we're not even in the mudwing swamps yet. I wonder if he'll be that excited when I get to the sea." "You'll see," Clay said, suddenly feeling certain and brave and confident. "And when you can fly, can you fix your wing?" He tilted his head, studying her injury. The waterfall poured down a cliff that towered over them, with even higher mountains beyond. The 3 moons were low in the sky. Clay guessed it would be morning soon, and then they could look for the smoke signal that would lead to their friends. But Tsunami couldn't fly. She'd be stuck down here, easy pickings for any hostile dragons flying by. Clay glanced up at the sky, remembering that they'd popped out into the world at war. It seemed so peaceful here. From the way the big dragons talked, he'd imagined the entire world as a giant battlefield. It was strange to be in a quiet clearing with no sights or sounds or war or even other dragons anywhere nearby. But he knew that the talons of peace, and by extension the dragonettes, had enemies everywhere. The 3 sandwing queens destructed the prophecy and would kill anyone who got in their way. and there was a whole list of dragons who might do terrible things to the dragonettes of destiny if they ever found them. Tsunami twisted to look at her dislocated wing. "I'm sure I can fix it," she said. "I saw this in a scroll once. It just needs to be banged back into place. Maybe if I run myself into a tree." She glanced around the forest, then suddenly charged at the nearest solid tree trunk. Clay leapt out of the mud and pounced on her tail, yanking her back before she crashed. "Ow!" Tsunami stormed. "Get off! I can fix this. This will work." She snapped her teeth at him. "Stop being a grumpy skywing. Smashing yourself into a tree is a terrible plan," Clay said. "Can I look at it?" Tsunami settled down on the grass, grumbling, with her wings spread out. Clay circled her, then stood back and looked at the uneven lines of her wings and shoulders. "If you can stay still," he said, "I think I can shove it back into place." "Is that a good idea?" Tsunami asked, flinching away from him. "Better than running into a tree," he pointed out. "Dig your claws in and brace yourself." Tsunami clutched the ground and closed her eyes. Clay felt gently along her shoulder with his front talons. It was easy to find the spot where a bone had slipped out of its socket. He touched it lightly until he was sure where it was and where it needed to be. Then he grabbed and shoved the bone into place on one quick, strong movement. "Ow!" Tsunami roared, rearing back. Her powerful tail whipped around and slammed Clay into a thicket of prickly bushes. I'm sorry, Clay yelped, floundering free. "I really thought that would work." He stopped. Tsunami was turning in a circle, flexing and extending both wings. They looked perfectly matched again. "It did work," she said. "It's a little sore, but I can move it now." "Pretty fierce, Clay." She helped disentangle his tail from her branches. "Sorry, I whacked you." Clay opened his mouth to respond, but Tsunami suddenly seized his snout and held it shut. She reached one talon, her ears twitching. "What's that?" she whispered. Clay tried to swivel his head around, but Tsunami's grip was too tight. He strained his ears to listen. Something was crashing through the forest towards them. So there you go. That was one of the chapters. I hope you enjoyed it and that it inspired you to read this book. And thank you again, Ada.